sorry to interrupt your conversations, but we're going to get started. For those of you who don't know who I am, my name is Gabe Reyes. I'm one of the co-chairs for the Sheboygan County Democratic Party, and this is our third installment of our Candid with Candidates speaking series. Before we get into the actual event, I'd like to start off by making an ask. If you reside in Sheboygan County, please consider becoming a member of the county party. It makes a huge difference in supporting our efforts, such as this, hosting events like this, as well as other events, as well as just the groundwork that we do in Sheboygan County. The groundwork that actually made us flipping Sheboygan County blue this past Tuesday. It's $25 a year. It's not much. It's small, but it makes a huge impact. So if you have any questions, Leah's in the back with membership envelopes, QR codes. Feel free to head that way if you have questions. And so, Candid with Candidates, this is our speaker series where the purpose is for candidates running for the Democratic nomination in the August primaries to tell who they are, as well as present their vision that they have for our county, district, state, and our country. Impact our nation as well if you're running for Congress. It also provides you the opportunity to learn about them, ask your questions that are most important to you, and then once you've learned from all the candidates, heard from them, it allows you to invest and support whichever campaign you think is the best one that should represent us. All good and clear? All right, so with that being said, I'm going to introduce our first guest, running for Wisconsin's 6th Congressional District. Please welcome Amanda Bell.
Okay, I'm short, so I'm going to put this up a little bit. Okay, so thank you for letting me come home, first off. I grew up here in Sheboygan County. My best friends are still here. My parents' dairy farm is only 10 miles out of town. I graduated from Howard's Grove and spent most of my summers playing in that lake because this is home to me. So I appreciate the honor and opportunity to come back here and home and talk to you. So a little bit about me. As I mentioned, I grew up on a dairy farm just outside of Sheboygan near Locks Hall. Let's be honest, anybody who's from Sheboygan or knows Sheboygan County probably been to a wedding at Locks Hall. So that is also where I had my first job. I bussed tables as a kid at Locks. So near and dear to my heart. But I grew up just outside of Johnsonville and learned value of hard work at a really early age. I mean, the cows don't care if you're tired. They still want to be fed and milked. The hay doesn't care if you're hot. On a 90-degree day, it still needs to be baled and put in the hay mow. So I've learned how to work until the job is done, sometimes working through a little bit of heat or exhaustion. We still have to get this done. And that's kind of how I've taken on most of the tasks in my life. When I graduated high school, I actually went to college for a year at the college in Sheboygan here, because my parents didn't have the money to help me with college, so I had to figure out a way to pay for it. So I went to school here in Sheboygan at the UW and got some of my undergrad credits done. It's also where I've met a whole bunch of my now lifetime friends. So from there, I worked at Bemis while I was going to school. I worked third shift at the Bemis factory, trimming toilet seats. Yeah, right? So I understand how much hard work goes into those factory jobs and how important unions are, because at 18 years old, I was making a pretty good living, trimming toilet seats. So I want to make sure we're protecting those union jobs and have the ability for people to make that living wage. Once I finished my first year in Sheboygan, I transferred to UW Stevens Point and started going for my degrees in watershed management and natural resources. I have my undergrad is in the watershed management, and I have my master's in natural resources. While I was there, I worked I worked all the way through college. I always had at least 2 jobs. I worked as a gas station attendant, and I worked in a bank running proof operations and as a teller. So I had the opportunity to do an internship with the U.S. Geological Survey out in Idaho for one summer, and I took that, and that is where I began my career. So since then, I've spent 24 years as a water scientist working for you, the American people. I had the privilege and honor of seeing our natural resources, our streams and rivers from the Carolinas to California and everywhere in between. I can honestly say that I've probably been to over 2,000 different rivers and I've walked in over 2,000 rivers across our country, which makes me understand and appreciate how valuable our water resources and our natural resources are to our everyday lives. Not only is it aesthetics, not only is it recreation, but it's tourism. It's the fishing industry and the food industry. It's literally our lifeblood to have clean drinking water. If we lose that clean air and clean water, we don't live. So one of the things that I can bring to Congress is an understanding and knowledge and love of our natural resources. While I was with the USGS, I worked my way up to be a supervisor and then deputy director of our 3-state office. That office covered Michigan, Minnesota, and Wisconsin. One of the things I learned as I was trying to understand leadership in federal agencies is I don't have all the answers. I never have and I never will. But the best thing I can do is ask people what they want, what they need, what issues they see, and figure out ways to either accommodate or to overcome those concerns. I always had a policy of asking the employees that I supervised, what are we doing that we should stop doing? Because it's not working. What are we doing that we should keep doing? Because it is working. And what are we not doing that we need to start? So I always base things on keep, stop, and start. Because I think that the folks that are actually living it, doing it every day, have a much better understanding. Always reminded me of the show Undercover Boss. Have you ever seen that one? Yeah. Where the boss actually has to go and flip the burgers. That was how I kind of saw things, because unless you're asking the people that are in the trenches every day, you don't see it. You don't understand kind of what they're going through. I have this wooden bowl on my table, on my dining room table. And it's a lathed bowl, and of course with wood, there's sometimes imperfections, right? On one side of the bowl, there's a knot. It has a little bit of bark on it. It's a little knot. It's a little imperfection. And on the other side, it's clear. It's just clear wood, no concerns, no waves, no imperfections. If I'm sitting across the table from you and I say, there's some imperfections on this bowl, and you're saying, there's not, all I have to do is turn that lazy Susan, and I can see your perspective and you can see mine. Neither of us were wrong. We just had a different vantage point. And that's what I want to bring to Congress as a representative. I may not see your side of things, but I want to learn from you and I want to hear it. And I want to understand your perspective. Because I think that's what makes it a lot better. Rather than this infighting and this, no, I'm right, you're wrong, that doesn't help. So that's one of the things that I learned as being a manager, that I really need to make sure that I'm listening to everybody's viewpoints. I left the survey. Last year, when this administration came in and DOGE started doging things, we'll use that as a verb, because I think everybody understands. I saw them doing things. They were canceling contracts. They were canceling leases. We had a lease with for one of our northern field offices. It's a very remote field office. There's not like there's a ton of businesses up there, but we've had this lease for 20 years. It was a great opportunity. We have a lab up there. We have warehouse storage. It was perfect for a small office with a few people to have our boat storage and our ability to do the water quality processing that we needed to. They sent a letter to the owner of the building and said, our lease is terminated effective next Tuesday. They didn't tell us that. So the lessor comes in and goes, why didn't you give me a heads up? I've known you guys for 20 years. And we're sitting here going, what? Sorry, I was the operations officer. I had no idea this was going on. Then they started canceling our contracts with our labs. We had contracts with water quality labs such as UW-Stevens Point, a university that provides a service, that we've gone through all the proper channels to make sure that we were doing our fair due diligence, not sole source, and not doing anything untoward, but it was a good contract. And they canceled it. They stopped payment on our water quality samples. We're a water quality agency. Our customers, our cooperators, paid for that analysis. Now what do we do? The last straw for me was actually when they started firing my employees. I'm sure you heard about the people that were cut, like the folks that were in charge of the nuclear codes. Well, they were doing that at other agencies too. Except they were doing it to folks who had just been hired. Now, unless you work in federal service, you may not know, it takes 2 years to hire someone. From the time the supervisor says, I want to hire somebody, to the time that they walk in the door, is a 2-year process. Because government works at the speed of government. So there's internal processes and reviews and checks, and we got to set up a test and this, that, and the other thing. And then you have to leave it open for a little while, and then HR has to go through everything and make sure everybody's qualified that needs to qualify. So I spent 2 years trying to hire an administrative assistant for our administrative officer. And this woman that we eventually hired, she had ran a veteran's home in Arizona. She was the lead administrator of a veteran's home. She came and moved herself, because we didn't pay for her to move, to Minneapolis, tripling her cost of living, but she moved there for an entry-level administrative assistant job so that she could maybe eventually get into a better administrative job in the government. She'd been with us about 6 months. She was our only administrative assistant at the time. We had 230 employees. She was helping with the credit cards and reconciliation of the credit cards for 230 people, the travel, the timesheets, paying the bills, dealing with FedEx, making sure shipments were going where they're supposed to. And this was all falling on one person. That on Valentine's Day, they terminated with no cause. They then asked us to go into her personal records and say that she was terminated for performance reasons. I refused. I will not. I will not destroy this woman's career and put in her permanent federal record that she was terminated for performance reasons when that was an absolute lie. I refuse to do that. So they're like, do it or you're fired. You can't fire me. It's really hard to fire a federal employee that's been there for more than 5 years. It's really hard. Unless you do something egregious. I admit, it's really hard. And I said, I've got a spotless record. I've always gotten exceptional in all of my performance reviews. You can't fire me. So they made my life miserable. They did all, between the give me your 5 bullets for the week, what did you work on, to we've cut off your credit cards, you can't travel, we have a hiring freeze. And then they offered the deferred resignation program, and I decided that I didn't see my representatives stopping this. And I said, no more. We're done. I am not going to allow this to go on anymore, unfettered, unrestricted. I'm going to go do something about it. So I left my career of 24 years. I'm too young to retire. I was a year shy of getting the nice benefits package, but I walked away. I took the deferred resignation and I left. I did go and get a license to be a substitute teacher, which is what I've been doing for the last, 6 months. I'm a substitute teacher, and now I'm a permanent sub, teaching high school algebra and geometry in a rural school in Columbia County. But I also decided that I wasn't going to just sit by and watch this continue, so that's why I declared my candidacy. That is why I want to represent you, because I don't feel represented. I don't feel like anybody's stopping this. I don't feel like the efforts that my husband, as a 20-year veteran of the Air Force, put his time in to protect our country, I don't feel like they're standing up for our veterans. They're certainly not standing up for the women in our lives, pushing the SAVE Act and voting against the Violence Against Women Act. Glenn Grothman is not standing up for the people of the 6th. He's not helping the farmers. He's not telling Trump no on this war. And that's where I'm just done with our current representative. I am going to be the woman that takes Glenn Grothman's seat. So as far as my platform goes, I'm Amanda and I like acronyms. So I've got my 4 A's. First off is affordability. Because let's be honest, right now things are so expensive. Between a 40% increase in gas prices over the last, 45 days of this war, 48 days? Is it sad? I've lost count. The cost of groceries increasing because of illegal tariffs, where our president is acting like a toddler that doesn't get his way. The increase in healthcare, because of that budget-busting bill taking away benefits and resources to make sure that we have those incentives for the Affordable Care Act. We're talking about housing affordability. I talked to somebody here in Sheboygan who said that they're living in their car. They're working at Tecumseh, but they're living in their car because the price of houses and rent is so high here in Sheboygan. These are comparable to Madison prices. And let's be honest, we don't have the resources, we don't have the benefits that they do in Madison here. We're facing unprecedented increases in electricity prices. Mostly because we are having these massive AI data centers come in and they are taking up resources and needing these huge transmission lines put in. And those costs are going to fall on us. So we need control over some of these affordability crises. We need somebody that actually knows how federal budgets work. And let me tell you, as a federal employee for 24 years, I know how federal budgets work. Part of that is also the simple fact that most agencies don't have this unlimited budget, like apparently the Department of Defense has, where they can just keep saying, we're just going to get this more money and more money and more money. When we had a project, we had a budget. We cannot go above that budget. If our costs increase, just like at home, if your costs increase, you can't tell your boss to just give you more money. It doesn't work that way. If your grocery bill doubles, you have to somehow figure out how to accommodate for that. Either you buy fewer groceries or you cut someplace else. And that's what I did my entire career. It's okay, if the cost of the lab increased or the cost of my bottles increased, maybe that meant I had to take fewer samples. Maybe that meant I had to pick a different set of tests to run. But I know how to budget. I've had times where my paycheck didn't cover my rent and groceries. So I worked 2 jobs. I know how to break a brick of ramen in half to make it for 2 meals. By the way, a bag of potatoes and a stick of butter will last you 2 weeks if you're really hungry. And I know how it feels to not have enough to make ends meet, because I've been there, I've lived that. So that's why affordability is so important to me. Next is accessibility. Again, we need to have that access, not only to our representatives and the ability to talk to them, but we need to have access to affordable health care and affordable housing. We need access to clean air and water. If we're not protecting our natural resources, again, we don't live. So we have to have access to clean air and water. We have to have access to free and fair elections. We don't need more boundaries and more hurdles to jump through and over and around so that I can vote. I have my passport, so I have my proof of citizenship and a document that shows, the difference between my birth name and my married name. But a lot of folks don't. I spoke to a woman at the American Legion in Fond du Lac, and she was saying that she was a veteran of the Vietnam War. The American government already has her birth certificate. They already have her marriage license, birth certificate from Utah, marriage license from California, and now she lives here in Wisconsin. She's like, the government has everything. They know I'm a citizen. I spent time in Vietnam fighting for, yeah. But she goes, but they're not gonna let me vote because I don't have a passport, because my name doesn't match what's on my birth certificate? It's like, this doesn't make any sense. They're purposely trying to make it so that I can vote. Another woman, as far as the SAVE Act goes, says, I'm a nurse, I work in the ICU, 12-hour shifts. She usually works days, so that means that she can't get to the polling location. She would always absentee vote. Well, if the SAVE Act goes through, that opportunity stops. The executive order that Trump signed said that only for military and disabled folks that aren't able to leave their assisted living homes, those are the only ones that are allowed, or for medical reasons, are the only ones allowed to mail and vote. He sent his ballot in. His wife sent her ballot in. How is it good for the goose, not good for the gander? So we need to make sure we have that accessibility. Next is, so we talked about affordability and accessibility. Now I want to talk about advocacy. Again, folks that have been marginalized, people that don't fit that perfect mold of what the folks in Congress or the folks in the cabinet think are what need to be the people that are being represented. I'm talking about my friends in the LGBTQIA+ community, or immigrants, even women. We are being pushed to the side and ignored. Glenn Grothman is multiple times saying he thinks that there's a war on men. Buddy, I mean, good on you, but I don't think there's a war on men. I think there's a war on accountability. I think there's a war on people that maybe don't fit his idea of a perfect person. We need to protect those marginalized communities. We need to give them a voice and an opportunity to be seen and heard instead of pushed to the side. So I want to make sure that I'm having that advocacy. Lastly, and this is a big one as far as my 25 years of ethics training, and it's accountability. We have lost accountability in our federal government. We have lost accountability in our cabinet, in our Congress, in our Senate, and definitely in our judiciary. When I take the oath of office, I promised to defend the Constitution from enemies foreign and state. Unfortunately, I think the enemies right now are foreign enemies within our state. When we are waging war against Iran without the support of our Congress, we have lost the accountability. When the judicial system says that the president has complete immunity, we have lost the accountability. When we have folks when we have heads of our leadership of federal agencies doing things like flying their girlfriend to and from Las Vegas for a party, when we're buying $200 million planes for a cabinet member to then be transferred to the private plane of our first lady, that's not accountability. We need folks that are going to stand up and say, no, we're not doing this anymore. This isn't right. This is not what our American taxpayer dollars should be going to. And I want to be the person that stands up and says no. A few of the folks in this room have known me for decades. And they know that I'm the person that's going to be like, hey, there's an elephant over there. And I've been told, shh, you don't talk about the elephant. Wait, but it's big, and it's right there. Don't talk about the elephant. I'm like, Okay, well, I'm going to talk about the elephant, because if we don't talk about the elephant, it's going to get mad and it's going to stomp on us and we're all going to die. So, elephant. So that's the kind of person I am. I'm not afraid to call out somebody's BS. I'm not afraid to have the hard conversations. I'm not the person that's going to shy away when there's a hard conversation and there's something that we need to talk about. Because I don't see it happening right now. There's maybe just a few people that I'm once in a while seeing glimmers of bucking the system, but we need some really intense accountability, and I want to do that for you. So I'm going to wrap it there, and I'm going to open it up to questions.
Yeah.
And I would like to thank you for your time today. Yeah.
I appreciate contrasting yourself with the current representative. When we go into the August election, it's going to be between different Democrats.
Yes.
And Democrats are, as we know, a big tent. At least we hope they are. So my question is, first one's really easy, then I'd like to follow up. First one is, do you consider yourself to be a progressive Democrat?
Oh, sorry. Yes.
Okay.
I consider myself a pragmatic progressive.
Okay. Would you for me then tell me the top 3 policies that you think differentiate you from what a lot of folks are calling establishment Democrats?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
So I think a few of the bills that are actually really front and center right now that set me apart. One of them is looking at the natural resources and AI. We have 2 very large AI data centers occurring in our district right now. I have been on the forefront of helping these communities learn and educate themselves about the water quality concerns. I've spoken at Beaver Dam and I've spoken at Janesville now, and the group with Port Washington has brought me in to help understand what these impacts are. So setting up legislation and setting up policies to regulate and understand the impacts of the data centers is going to be one of my first and foremost policies that I would like to enact and work with. The best time for this legislation should have been about 5 years ago. The next best time is today. I know that there's some work being done within Wisconsin to set a moratorium on the AI data centers, any new developments, but I'm afraid it might be too late. Now we're actually seeing that the data centers are pulling out when construction has already started. So we need the right legislation not only on the building, but also on the use of AI in our government, in our military, and in American people's lives, because they're talking about AI hallucinations. I don't know if you ever heard about that. Where if you type in my name, one person said, well, it looks like you grew up in rural Pennsylvania and your parents were union folks. And I'm like, no, my parents were, farmers in Wisconsin. So it's like, basically AI starts to hallucinate and make up things. So having that regulation, making sure that what they're using the data for all needs to be taken care of, and it cannot be written by the people that are paying for it. So that's one of the policies. Another one is actually an act that has been put in place to help federal workers. And one of the things, again, if you're not a federal employee, you probably wouldn't know a lot of this stuff, but there's several ways to begin as a federal employee. You can start as a contractor, you can start as like a temporary or like a non-permanent person. Those types of employments don't, or you can start as a student and a few other ways, but that type of employment doesn't actually help you and count towards your retirement. So somebody, especially seasonal workers in think the Forest Service or the National Park Service. So in the Park Service, they hire a lot of folks for the season Forest Service hires a lot of folks, especially for firefighting, wildland firefighting. So they'll hire them for 6 months and then send them on their way. The post office also does this a lot. And they can work for 164 days, and they have to have a day off, and then they can redo their contract. And they'll do this for several years. So they might work 4 years before they're actually offered a permanent job. And by doing this, the government doesn't have to include that in their retirement. They don't have to offer them benefits. They don't have to offer them a lot of the benefits that federal employees do. So this act that's going in right now actually helps with that and being converted and added to the retirement plans or the retirement time. So that's another one, because those are federal public servants. Let's be perfectly honest, people can make a lot more money on the private sector, but that would mean that services like Social Security, IRS, veterans benefits, your clean water, EPA, and other agencies, you lose a lot of folks if we don't support those federal workers. They're not I'll tell you, they're not the career politicians that people think they are. It's literally a kid from college that went to school because they wanted to help with, clean water, wanted to go work for the Park Service. So that's the second policy that I really want to push that a lot of the other folks don't even really know about. And the other one is the PRO Act that I really want to help. The PRO Act is a pro-union legislation that takes a lot of the right to work language out and makes sure that it is the worker protections and reinstating a lot of the workers' rights that were taken away from executive orders or other legislation, and make sure that's reinstated and put into legislation to be protected going forward. So those would be the kind of 3 things that I really want to focus on and move forward. My first few the first chances I get, those would be the ones that I really want to push. Yeah.
I like your example of the hamburger maker. You got to walk in the shoes of the hamburger maker.
Yes.
Glenn Roseman, he walks in the shoes of the people that eat the hamburger. And the next event, eating. Well,
full disclosure, I did come from a pancake breakfast in Columbus. But I was there to support the firefighters, and I paid.
All right. I had a chance to meet you a while ago because of the National Education Association.
Yes.
I'm a retired teacher, and we want to eventually recommend a candidate from the 6th CD to our members. And one of the tasks I was assigned on that committee was to ask this question. Yes. And this may have changed since you have been running for a few days since we talked about this. But what kind of infrastructure do you have for campaigning? We're looking at a huge district with, I think, 11 counties. Is there 11 counties in it? So could you describe what kind of campaign committee that you have so far, and what you plan on doing as we move closer and closer to the election periods? You get all the different kinds of things, the staff people and volunteers that take care of certain things. Could you describe what yours looks like right now?
Absolutely, thank you. So I am running as grassroots of a campaign as I could possibly be. I don't have the I do not have the financial pot right now to pay any staffers. I've probably one of the lower financial accounts than most of the other Democrats running. But all of my financial donations thus far have come from folks that have heard me know what I'm talking about and understand that I want to represent them. So I don't have corporate interest. I have not been able to donate large sums of money to my own campaign. I'm donating my mileage, and I'm donating everything I can. That's non-monetary, because substitute teachers don't make that much, nor do DNR foresters, as my husband is. But I am basing my campaign on volunteers. I have a volunteer campaign manager and a volunteer co-campaign manager volunteer treasurer, volunteer events coordinator, and I'm working on, or I have several people in each county that are also helping me get out for signatures. I have a really great base of people that are interested in my campaign and have reached out and said, if you need something, if you need signatures, if you need this and that, and that's what I'm going to rely on. Because I believe that people are best suited for volunteering in places they're passionate about. I'm not going to ask somebody who's an introvert to go out and knock on doors, because that's not going to be their jam. But if they want to help with the website, they want to help do data entry for me, that's absolutely great. And that's where I'm working. I have a volunteer coordinator that's helping set up those skill sets with the tasks that we need completed. So one of the other parts of my campaign, because I've been through it and I know how to budget, I actually am aiming to try to underspend rather than overspend the other candidates. My goal is to win this race, having only spent a tenth or a quarter of what some of the other candidates have. Because I'm not paying staff. Because I don't think that hiring people from DC or institutional political activists, people that have been doing election after election after election, I don't think that's the way that we're going to win this election. We need some very different methods. People aren't on social media as much as they were 4 years ago because of all the concerns with selling our data. But showing up to events like this, going to the Columbus Fire Department, meeting people where they're at is how this campaign is going to be won. And that's what I'm doing. And I've got some really great volunteers that are helping me go to these events, make sure that we're getting out there and getting known. So, hasn't changed too much. I'm still probably the underdog as far as money, and my fellow candidates will remind me of that every time they can, which, I don't know, I was brought up not to brag about how much is in my bank account, but that's neither here nor there. But I personally really want to make sure that every dime that is given to my campaign is used and stretched to make sure that it is helping to reach out to as many voters as I can. So,
Thank you.
yes.
What are your views about subsidized by the government clean energy, EVs, and subsidized childcare?
So I'll do childcare first. Our district has severe daycare deserts. I've been meeting with daycare providers and folks that run daycares across the district. And the thing that they've said is, when we had subsidized care during COVID, because of the extreme stress that parents were under and the extreme stress that daycares were under for people, especially in essential workers, that helped so many kids. One of the problems that we have with daycares is that depending upon where you sit in a school district, if your school district doesn't get the free school lunch program, then your daycare doesn't get any subsidies to help with lunches for daycare. But if you're in a school district that does have that lower income and that free school care, or the school lunch, then they do. Now mind you, these daycare centers can be a block apart in one school district or another. The demographics don't change that much. But the impact that money has on the ability to have better paying or better jobs, more food options is huge. The daycare centers are building the brains of tomorrow, as is our public schools. So I do believe that we should be subsidizing and helping daycare centers, because if we don't have daycare centers, then we don't have ways that our working families, we don't have people that can care for our children while our families are working. One of the things that affected me during the government shutdowns, because over 24 years, we had a lot of them. Actually got to the point where the first Trump administration, my daughter was, I don't know, she was pretty little, but we had a really long shutdown to the point where we hadn't gotten paid in almost a month. Our savings were dwindling, and I'm sitting here going, okay, I don't know how I'm gonna pay the $800 this week for daycare. Don't know how. And I talked to the daycare provider, and they're like, well, if you pull her out, you lose your spot. I'm like, okay, so I have to decide, am I going to go in the red in my savings and checking account so that I keep that slot for my daughter to be in daycare? Or do I take her out and then when the shutdown ends, I don't have any place for her to go? That's not a decision that people should be making. That's not something that anybody should have to face. Where if we had subsidized daycare that helps provide those services, single moms wouldn't have to work. Single dads wouldn't have to worry. Families that are working 2 or 3 jobs to make ends meet could be in a lot better place. So, yes, on daycares. Then the next one about the renewable energy. We need renewable energy. Our coal resources and our natural gas and other petroleum resources are dwindling. I realize that the president doesn't think that's a problem, but I see it as a big problem. Part of the concerns I have about incentivizing some of these renewable sources is that we'll get bad actors. And there is need to make sure that we don't have the manipulation of the markets like we are in our current energy situation. So if we can come to a good balance of how to make sure that we're doing renewable energy properly. For example, right now, about 2 miles down from my house, they're taking over 120 acres in one section and 240 acres in another section of very fertile farmland, and it is being built into a solar farm and a battery storage for that solar farm. What's more important to us? The food that is produced on that agricultural land, or the energy that is going to be produced from the solar farms? And I'll be honest, I don't know. I personally think we should be investing in making sure that we're preserving our farmland so that we have food, but I also see the need to make sure that we have renewable energy and that we're not reliant on fossil fuels. So I think there's work to be done and more research, and because I'm a scientist, I always like more research. So.
Touching upon farms.
Yes.
Wisconsin farm bankruptcies increased from 2 in 2024 to 16 in 2025, which is a 700% increase. What do you think can be done to sustain our small family farms? Yeah, so I've actually known several people that declared bankruptcy over the last couple of years here, especially on farms. And one of the things that's been crippling them is the oligopolies. I've been practicing that word, that our farming community faces. So monopoly is just one company, but an oligopoly is several companies completely controlling the market. For farmers, we've got basically 4 companies that control all the seed, 3 companies that control all the fertilizer and pesticides. Then we have the government controlling basically their markets and the input and the imports that are coming in. So when we've got companies that can say where you can buy your seed from, where you can take your tractor to get it repaired, which tractors you can buy, where you can buy your fertilizer, that's not a free and fair market. That is a handful of companies saying, if you buy from there, you also have to buy from this company, because if you buy seeds from this company and pesticides from that company, it won't work. It won't work because the way that they formulated and genetically modified the corn here
You use this pesticide, it's gonna kill that corn. So you have to use their pesticide. So they've locked you in and made sure that you can't actually go and compare and price check. But you also know that they're all having beers at the same expensive clubs to determine, hey, we're gonna raise our seed prices X amount. You should raise yours X amount too, so that they don't suddenly go to you. And so you know that they're all working together. So if we do some serious antitrust laws and actually enforce those antitrust laws, I think we came back to where family farms can actually sustain and survive. And the antitrust goes further than just the farms. It's including media. How much of our data does Google have, for God's sakes? But it's also car manufacturers. It's our energy companies. We need to make sure that these huge corporations that are controlling our lives, controlling our ability to buy food. I mean, if you go into the grocery store, you have an option of Kraft, General Mills, maybe, is it Nestle? But you only really have 4 food companies that control all of our food products. There's maybe a handful of independents, but that's not what's being set right in front of you at eye level at the grocery store. So we need to make sure that we're actually fulfilling all of those antitrust laws. It'll help our farmers, it'll help our consumers, it'll help everybody. So.
And then another follow-up question. You mentioned for like a solar farm taking over agricultural land. There's that part of it, but there's also the NIMBYism part of it, where people don't want, to drive past a gaudy, huge solar panel farm. Do you have any like innovative ideas on how to implement renewable resources like solar, wind?
Well, I drove past that giant AI data center in Beaver Dam just on my way here. I live over in Columbia County, over by Portage now, so I drive past that every time I come to the east side of Wisconsin. Why are they not putting up the solar panels on top of their giant factories? Why are we not putting solar panels and incentivizing those solar on our roofs? Why are we not encouraging people to do this at their own homes? And the cities, where we have, let's be honest, that giant parking lot outside of Lake Walmer? How cool would it be to have solar panels that cover your car in winter? I'm just saying. They actually do that in Minneapolis at the U of M in St. Paul, where they have solar panels that basically provide shade and cover for their vehicles. I'm like, that's really slick. Instead of taking up our farmland, why don't we have it on the mall? Why don't we have solar panels on top of City Hall? And I think that if we actually started implementing kind of smart design and smart management plans, we could do this. I've seen it happen in other cities. It is one of the cool things that I have the opportunities with traveling across the country and going into and watching our natural resources. It's kind of the cool thing. I'm like, hey, that's a really great idea. Why are we not doing this all over the place? So I would super love to see us having dual use for like especially new construction, but also retrofitting kind of our old construction. So, and then we don't have to drive past gaudy solar farms. Yes.
Excuse me, I hope I'll become a curmudgeon, I guess.
That's okay.
Let's look at the following scenario. You've just been elected to a house that is narrowly flipped Democrat.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The Senate may or may not have flipped to being Democrat, but it certainly isn't at a 60 senator level that needed to overcome a filibuster. Okay, you still got, I don't know what I want to use for a term, up on top at the presidency.
Hostile?
Yeah, I was going to say asshole, but okay, now, there you are, you have great ideals, you have great goals, but now, how do you say sit down and make a difference. There's a lot of ways that this Congress can go. There's a lot of directions, a lot of things, you know, impeachment, trying to build stuff through, holding up on budgets and such. What do you see as your role? Where do you caucus? Where do you work?
I work with what the District 6 people want me to work on.
Okay.
Admittedly, I'm running on the Democratic ticket. Most of my values align with the Democratic Party. That said, there are people in my family that do not have the same viewpoints as I do. To work with them, I sit down and have a conversation. Because I really do think that we have ties that bind every one of us, regardless of how you vote. So I've worked with congressional representatives. In my time, I've presented to Republican and Democratic congressional representatives and senators multiple times throughout my career. And I'll tell you a secret. They're people just like us. They're not this, most of the time, when they're not in front of the cameras, they're actually pretty decent people to have conversations with. And I really do think, with the exception of some very extreme people, they're reasonable. And given the opportunity, I really do think that we can come to compromise on some things. But ultimately, I want to make sure that I'm representing the 6th district rather than party lines. So I want to make sure that if there's something up for a vote, that I'm holding town halls and I'm working with folks within the district to find out, hey, this is a policy for you. Do you want me to support this, or do you want me to vote against it? Regardless of party line. Because I think if we can start having representatives that do that, we can have the more popular, like the populists, actually starting to have a bigger voice. And then the senators that are constantly ignoring constituents, the representatives that don't have town halls, like somebody, or at least not in-person town halls where you can actually ask a real question. But I enjoy having the conversations where somebody doesn't necessarily align with my thoughts. All I want to do is turn that bowl on the Lazy Susan and be like, I can see where you're coming from, but I also need a little bit of you seeing where I'm coming from and why this is good for not only the constituents in the 6th, but also in whatever district that you represent, whatever state you're senator for. Because if we can have those conversations and have those caucuses where we're actually representing people, that's where the real change is going to happen. And I can't believe that if Ron Johnson would come in here today and ask the city of Sheboygan, should he vote for the SAVE Act? I can't believe that he would get the overwhelmingly yes from the citizens that he is supposedly representing. So that's all I'm going to keep being like, right, who do you represent? Who elected you? And what do they say? And yes, I would vote for impeachment every day of the week.
You kind of talked about this in your intro, but I want to go back to your 24 years of service in the federal government. DOJ, did their thing, claiming that they were cutting waste, fraud, and abuse. What would you say is your proudest achievements, initiatives? How did it shape you as a person? You kind of touched upon it, but yeah, what are you most proud of in your tenure?
So I was hired as the National Water Quality Program, which is a national program that covers all of the U.S. The National Water Quality Program Ecological Sampling Coordinator. It was a whole lot to put in my signature line, by the way. That was a trick trying to say that every day. But as part of that, my job was we were sampling different regions across the country, and each year we focused on a different region. In that region, we were sampling 100 to 120 sites, and we had 2 weeks to do it. We had 2 weeks to sample 100 sites. And we had to collect fish, invertebrates, algae, water quality, sediments, hydrology, like we had to collect all of this stuff. And they said, Amanda, figure it out. Like, okay. So I ended up breaking up into teams, coordinating, and the reason we had such a tight timeline is not getting too deep into all the ecology of water, but you have a very short window of time where you can compare the bugs from this stream to the bugs from that stream because they're going to hatch, because they're going to fly away. So we had to do a really tight time frame. So I had the opportunity to work with, I ended up with 5 to 7 different teams, broke up the sites depending upon where they were, coordinated all the bottle kits, all the laboratories, had this whole like crazy logistic thing with bottle kits and coolers and labels, and it was a logistical nightmare, and I loved it. But it was interesting because some of the leadership within the overall program was alphabet soup of the federal government was called NAPWA. And when it was all said and done, I'm driving back from Tennessee after busting my tail in, oh my gosh, by the way, trying to sample in neoprene waders in Georgia in like July. Heat exhaustion is not something I realized I would get every single day that I was sampling. But, so I was on my way back to Wisconsin with all the equipment done, all the labs had gotten the samples, we were finished sampling. And the guy called me up and he said, you know, Amanda, I know you are somehow able to create miracles out of thin air. He goes, but I admit I never actually expected this to work. He goes, I literally had a bet on you that this would fail. And he goes, and I'm eating my words, and I'm really sorry I doubted you. But he goes, you somehow accomplished sampling 120 streams in 2 weeks and saved the government over $200,000 because we had budgeted for you to do an entire another week with 40 people and all the samples. He goes, so you just saved the American taxpayer $200,000 because you were able to pull this off so easily and so efficiently. That might be one of the things that I'm most proud of. So,
Closing thoughts.
thank you. Thank you for coming out. Thank you for asking questions. Thank you to anybody who has supported me. If you'd like, I've got a newsletter you can sign up for. Kind of the next steps is this coming Wednesday, we open up the opportunity to sign nomination papers for the candidates. I will tell you, if you're signing nomination papers, please only sign for one candidate or your signature gets thrown out, especially for anybody else also running on the 6th district platform. So nominational papers will close at the end of May. We've got 6 weeks to collect those, and we've got to collect 1,000 signatures. Then once I get those signatures, I will be on your ballots on August 11th, and for the primary, there will be several other people on that primary. I encourage you to vote for Amanda. Just remember ringing that bell for liberty. When I'm elected for the primary, you will then see my name on the ballot in November, on November 3rd, where you will also see several other candidates. Glenn will likely be on that one. There may be an independent or two. Again, I appreciate your vote for Amanda Bell. Also, make sure you're voting for your gubernatorial preferred candidate, both in the primary and in the general. Once November is finished, I will take office in January. But one of the things I'm going to plan to do is I'm hoping to set up my office in either somewhere either Fond du Lac or Waupun, trying to get kind of in the center of the district. From there, my hope is to be back, and when I am here at home in the district, I will have open office hours, and I encourage you to come and talk to me either in person, leave a message. My plan is to have folks out and available for field visits, that if somebody says, hey, I've got this huge problem and I really want to talk to somebody, my hope is to have folks out there and able to talk to you about your concerns and able to help you and allow me to help solve those issues. I will be also holding town halls on a regular basis across the district so that if there are concerns, people can bring them to me. But I'm also going to ask you, hey, this bill is up for vote. What are your thoughts on it? Tell me what your thoughts are. Tell me how you would like me to represent you, because that's going to make me the best representative I can for our district. So again, I'd like to thank you for your time. If you want more information, it's amandabellforcongress.org. My email address is on those cards. My phone number comes to me, so you have access to me. I'm not going to be somebody that is ignored and untouchable. So thank you again for your time. You all can move forward.
Thank you, Amanda. And now, our next guest, please welcome candidate for Governor of Wisconsin, former Lieutenant Governor Mandela Barnes.
All right, thank you so much. And thank you so much, Amanda, for stepping up to run. It's not easy. As you will learn, this is the very early stages, but now we're starting to get in the thick of it, and as the weather gets warmer, you're going to wonder why you aren't able to hang out and you got to go campaign instead. You'll question your life decisions. But really just want to say how much I appreciate everybody for being here. I'm Mandela Barnes, former Lieutenant Governor, really excited to be in this race, become the next governor of the state of Wisconsin. However, it's a really difficult and troubling reason why I decided to get in this race, and that's because life has gotten so hard for so many people all across this state. Unfortunately, we have a president who has not made life easier for people. In fact, he's made it more difficult. He's a person who's amassed an additional $1.5 billion in personal wealth in his first year back in the presidency. At the same time, people have been plunged into debt. We have a president who would more willingly invade or bomb another country than provide us with health care or provide us with the relief that we so desperately need in this affordability crisis. We've seen healthcare costs rise. We see utility rates rise. We see housing costs increase, and what was that? Healthcare? Everything costs more. That's what you hear with any person you talk to all across Wisconsin. It's become, like I said, more difficult. We need leaders who are going to stand up. First, people are going to stand up against Donald Trump when he's hurting people in the state of Wisconsin, but also people who are going to show up and actually deliver on the promise that we as Democrats hold true. In a state like Wisconsin, things, again, can be difficult. I'm very grateful for Governor Evers and everything that he's done, especially with the hostile legislature that has tried to stop him every step of the way. But at this moment, we know that we have to do even more to fully fund our public schools, to provide health care for everybody, to close those tax loopholes that allow the wealthy to get away without paying their fair share. And I actually came here to deliver a different message, and that's that Viktor Orban lost, if you haven't been paying attention. That's right, I mean, don't do like that. Viktor Orban's out of here. So obviously we can get rid of Trump at some point, and Trumpism, because even after Trump is gone, there's Trumpism that we have to root out of our politics that still exists. When people ask about Tom Tiffany, when I talk to people in other states, they say, well, was he MAGA? Well, he was MAGA before MAGA. This dude has been, crazy from the start. But to the point about what we have to do, unfortunately, we know across the country, congressional Democrats have made it very difficult for the public to have confidence in us. We have a problem with branding. We have a problem, unfortunately, with the people's idea of us delivering. But Wisconsin has always been an outlier. We're a state that has bucked so many trends in the past before. We are a state that has been an example of how to lead and how to govern. Now, unfortunately, we've had our instances where we backslid, the 8 years that preceded Governor Evers, but at the same time, we've always come back. And so many folks in this room, you've been there through the good times, you've been there through the bad times, you've been there through the wins, you've been there through the losses, but you kept coming back because you know that this state is worth fighting for. And that's why I said we have to close those loopholes and allow the wealthy to get away without paying their fair share. We have to tax the wealthy. We have to tax these out-of-state corporations that have been getting over on us. And this isn't just me having beef with large corporations. This is me looking at the situation that we all have been dealt. Now, especially Sheboygan, you know what deindustrialization has done to a community like this. But my grandfather, he moved to Milwaukee after his service in the Navy during World War II. He got a job as a union steelworker. Essentially walked in the building one day, walked out 35, 40 years later. He was able to retire with relative comfort and dignity. And most importantly, he was able to create a stable foundation, a middle-class foundation, that allowed me to be able to stand here in front of you all today. I'm deeply grateful for it. But the fact is, the factory where he worked doesn't exist anymore. My dad was lucky enough to be able to follow in his footsteps, work in a different factory, and the factory my dad worked does not exist anymore. And it's not as if people got tired of working. It's not as if people no longer needed to put food on the table. It's not as if people no longer needed to provide for their families. It was corporate greed. It was the executives who decided that they could make even more money, that they could increase their profits while sending our good-paying Wisconsin jobs to other countries. It is an unfortunate reality because we know exactly what happened when those jobs were uprooted. What filled that void was hopelessness, poverty, and then what followed that was crime, addiction, all these other things that made life more and more difficult for people, and the problems have yet to be solved. And if we are able to fund and finance and subsidize billionaire lifestyles, the least we can do is help out the hardworking people in this state who show up to work every single day and aren't fairly compensated. The hardworking people who've done everything right, who play by every rule in the books, but still cannot seem to get ahead. So for those companies that have sent our good-paying jobs overseas, they're no longer eligible for tax breaks. Those companies that are looking to outsource our jobs to artificial intelligence do not deserve tax breaks. Those companies that don't pay a living wage do not deserve tax breaks. This is what we have to ask of people. This is what we have to ask of corporations because we've already asked so much of hardworking folks. And we have to end the era of the paycheck-to-paycheck economy that's kept so many people down. Our minimum wage is still $7.25. The federal minimum, the least you can pay people. And it is disgusting because at the same time, our country is on track to see the first trillionaire in the world. The first trillionaire at a time, again, where people are dealing with unimaginable issues when it comes to affordability. And the reason things cost so much is not inflation. More often than not, it's greedflation. Because these companies, these executives are making record profits. And one of the other reasons that life has gotten so difficult is because the cost of health insurance. It has been a burden to so many folks. Early in this campaign, we had a roundtable discussion about the impact of tariffs on small businesses and our family farms. And inevitably, like so many other conversations, it came right back to healthcare. Now, I spoke with a guy who told me that his health insurance premium was set to increase from over $275, or around $275, to over $1,600 a month. Not a real reaction in this room because it is a common story, and it is very likely that you either got a letter or you know somebody that got a similar letter or is dealing with a similar situation. Now, this is the case because Congress failed to extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits. And we know exactly who was in Congress, who was able to take that vote right alongside St. Brockman. We know exactly who was alongside him, and that was Tom Tiffany. Now, you're not going to hear me mention his name too much because this campaign can't just be about how bad he is. It has to be about our plan to improve quality of life for people all over this state and all over this country. But there is accountability that has to be taken for that disastrous vote. In fact, we were in his district when we had this conversation. This is a person who has failed the people that he already represents. And if given the opportunity to get anywhere near the governor's office, he will absolutely leave us all behind and curry favor with Donald Trump. And that's exactly why Donald Trump handpicked him to become the Republican nominee for governor. We know that we deserve so much more because we have worked for so much more. And it is also shameful that Wisconsin is one of 10 states that has yet to expand our Medicaid program under the Affordable Care Act. And that's exactly why I made Badger Care expansion a day one priority for the administration. And in addition to Badger Care expansion, we are going to implement a public option to ensure that people have a reliable form, a reliable system of health care to buy into. If you're starting a small business, if you're in between jobs, if you're in the gig economy, or you're just priced out of the system. This is how we bring down healthcare costs on day one. In addition to that, I released my freeze the rates plan. So I'm not sure about you, but I've seen my utility bill go high. I've seen my utility bill go up. And we have We Energies, which is a monopoly, and they are proposing another 14% rate increase. If this rate increase is approved, we will have seen utility rates increase 50% since 2020. At the same time that we're paying more for the same energy. In fact, I'm pretty sure people in this room bought more energy efficient appliances in the last 60 years or so because we thought we could save some money. And we're still paying more money. And at the same time, we also see executive pay at We Energies go from $4 million to $12 million. You can't tell me that this is all about the capital costs and the investments that need to be made. Because I do agree there need to be capital improvements as well as upgrades to the grid and other infrastructure to deliver electricity to homes. But you can't justify that by tripling the CEO pay while all of us are paying even more at the same time. People are just struggling to put food on the table. People are struggling to pay rent. The prospect of buying a house is so far out of the realm of possibility for so many people. That's not who we are as a state. We're a state that has built this world. We're a state that feeds the world. We are a state that has delivered so much opportunity in times past. And that's exactly what I want us to be known for once more. And it's not about going back to the time when my granddad was able to walk into A.O. Smith. This is about providing a new era of opportunity. This is about fully funding, like I said, our public schools, because our state, because of extreme conservative Republicans, has failed year after year to meet the constitutional requirement for 2/3 funding. And because of it, we have seen property taxes increase drastically. And I'm sure folks in this room have gotten sticker shock when you've opened up your mail and see your property taxes. I had a conversation with somebody, close to the holidays who said he got his property tax bill and he didn't want to open it around Christmas because he didn't want to turn into a Grinch. He said he'd wait till later. And he knew exactly what he was in for. It's what so many other people were in for. And it is shameful that Republicans have placed this burden on property taxpayers because they have failed to put our future first. So not only are we going to invest in public education fully, we are also going to invest in our university system because Wisconsin shouldn't be 44th in the nation, 44 out of 50 states when it comes to state support for funding our university system. We also have to provide more opportunities in tech schools so that people are able to go into programs that are shielded from the direction and the whims of this very uncertain and unstable economy and four-year colleges and for everybody. But we know that we have to be able to train up a workforce so that they can be ready to go. Now, I want to be able to answer some questions, so I'm going to wrap this up shortly. But this is about governing with urgency. This is about leading and showing up in the moment as it calls us to. And the reason people are frustrated with Democrats because it seems as if we're always a little bit slow to the punch. And when people are dealing with difficult circumstances, it feels as if the party can negotiate ourselves out of progress too often. And at the same time, as things get difficult, when people feel like they can't count on us, they won't always vote for Republicans, but sometimes they just don't show up to vote. And that is a real problem that we have been dealing with. It's a problem we will continue to deal with until we truly, truly meet this moment. We got a lot to be proud of. We got a lot to be excited about with the state Supreme Court race and Chris Taylor getting elected. Truly couldn't have happened to a better person, a person who absolutely helped me out along the way when we served in the state assembly together. But we know our November races are different. Our November races are much closer. There's so much money that's being spent in these races. But we are building the grassroots effort, as I've done in times past. I know so many of you were around in 2018 when we took on and defeated Scott Walker, when people thought that that wasn't possible, and we changed the direction of the state of Wisconsin. We changed the game, and I'm proud of the work, like I said, that has been done, but now it's time for us to do even more, to dream bigger, to be even more imaginative, for Wisconsin to truly meet our promise and live up to our motto of forward. I remind people very often that Wisconsin was the first state to ratify the 19th Amendment, to give women the right to vote. We were the first state to declare the Fugitive Slave Act unconstitutional. We were the first state to have anti-discrimination laws based on sexual orientation on the books. We were the first state to have anti-discrimination laws based on ability on the books. We have done incredibly bold things before, and this moment calls for us to be bold once again and provide an example of leadership to this entire country. We're going to show up, not just in every county, but we're going to show up in every community. We are going to by brick, and we are organizing for the long term. This isn't just about one election cycle. This is about organizing and governing for the future. And so we can unite urban, suburban, rural, and every community under the sun in this state so that we can truly, truly reach our promise to build intergenerational organizing and dialogue, racial, everything. It doesn't matter where you were born, who you love, how you identify, all these other factors that folks have used to keep us separate in the past. We know that our diversity, our differences, are our strength. We won't win in spite of our differences. We'll win because of our differences. And I know that so many of you who have been along for this wild ride we've been on for all these years, I know that you all are also as committed as I am. After my race in 2022, that was decided by 1 point, I wrote an op-ed that said I still believe that better is possible. Because I got in the race for a reason. I knew that we could change things. I knew that we had to change things. And I knew that regardless of the outcome, there were still problems that would need to be fixed. And since that race, I've spent my time back in organizing. I led a group called Howard to the Polls. We focused on engaging new and infrequent voters. We showed up because we weren't willing to settle for the fact that there's been a decline in black voter participation since 2012. We didn't want to sit comfortably with that. Other states decided they make up the margins in suburban communities. I think we should do both. I think we should organize and galvanize as many voters as possible. And through that program, through the year-round organizing efforts that we put together, Milwaukee ended up having the highest voter turnout of the 50 largest cities in the entire country. Milwaukee also saw the least significant swing towards Donald Trump relative to other similarly situated cities. So other major cities and swing states, Detroit, Philadelphia's, Phoenix's, you name it, Phoenix's, you name it. But they saw 3 to 7% swings. Milwaukee was about 1% because we took each voter seriously. And those are the lessons that I am applying to this campaign. We're not leaving a single stone unturned. I know exactly what my starting point is, and having come out on the winning side in 2018, and unfortunately not in 22, having won and lost, I know exactly what we need to do to get the job done because I've had that experience for better and for worse. And so many of you who were along on that journey, I just want to thank you all. We built the largest fundraising, or the largest grassroots fundraising base. We also built one of the largest volunteer bases ever in this state. It's one of the biggest operations. I'm so proud of what we've done. And now it's time for us to take it to the next level. We didn't get that close just to turn around and go home. We're going to see this through, and we're going to lead Wisconsin into the future, but we know that that cannot happen without you. So just want to thank you all so much for having me.
I'll start. So a lot of people view lieutenant governors as just line of succession. What were some accomplishments, projects that you worked on as lieutenant governor? Yeah, absolutely. And I am, I'm going to go out there confidently and say that I have been the most active lieutenant governor of my lifetime. There's been 5, and I have absolutely been the most active. I led our climate change task force. That was the most involved work that I was a part of. And leading that climate change task force, for the very first time, Wisconsin implemented a clean power plan. We made strides with Governor Doyle. Obviously, we know Governor Walker rolled back all of those efforts, effectively scrubbed the words climate change from any state website, purged scientists from the Department of Natural Resources. But when we took, on election night, the first thing that came out of my mouth for the speech, my 3-minute speech that I was able to give, I said, we're bringing science back, because it had been missing. And science is very important, not to just me as an individual, but to the future of our state. And we have to take threats like climate change seriously, one, but also the opportunities that we have to create good paying jobs. Now, the factory where my dad worked, he assembled catalytic converters. Catalytic converters were only necessary after the implementation of the Clean Air Act required lower or higher emission standards for vehicles. A catalytic converter was the way to get you there. Now, my dad, might tell you he did it all on his own, but there was thousands of other people who got good paying jobs because of sound policy, because of smart policy, because of science that solved a problem that we had and also created economic opportunity in the process. So not only
what the task force did, we come up with the state's first clean power plan. We also created the Office of Sustainability and Clean Energy, the Office of Environmental Justice, and there is still a slate of 60 plus other recommendations that are ready to go on day one. That's why this race, this cycle, is more than just about me getting elected governor. This is about a majority in the Senate and in the Assembly. This is about flipping these congressional seats that, we need, better representation, stronger voices in DC that are actually gonna fight for us. And that climate change task force work was the most that I was involved in, but at the same time, led some of our rural prosperity initiatives that included the largest broadband expansion ever in the state of Wisconsin. I led some of our health equity council work, got that off the ground. I led our census complete count committee. I think Wisconsin had the second highest count, second most accurate count in the entire country, which helped save a congressional seat for us. Thankfully, we've got to do that all over again because we're at risk of losing a congressional seat. And was also involved in some of our violence prevention work, and also, most importantly, the state budget. The governor and I had a great relationship, still do have a great relationship. And when we took office, we went all around the state. We had our budget listening sessions, and we put forth the people's budget. And I was able to be in the room, to go line by line, to prioritize the things that were important, make sure we put more money back into public schools, to make sure that we got some other items into the state budget to help improve quality of life. Now, obviously, Republicans took a whole lot of it out once it got to them. But the fact is, we put it forward because that wasn't just what we thought was important. It's what folks like you, it's what folks in rooms all across the state told us what was important. And we led with the will of the people. So often the will of the people is rejected because of the unfair maps we've been subject to for the last 15 years. But on the ceiling of the governor's conference room, it says the will of the people should be the law of the land. And we wanted to ensure that the law of the land could be reflected by the will of the people, and at the same time, we had those Republicans in the legislature that didn't see fit, but their day is coming this November.
Yeah, I just want to follow up on your answer to the task force that you were involved in as far as climate change and alternative energy resources. I really appreciate that. I consider myself an environmentalist. I follow that completely. With all the stakeholders you had to deal with, you went through a lot of different information, and I'm happy to see the results of that. Now, what have you done to stay focused on that since you've been out of office? And then the second part of the question is, Tom Tiffany is a mini-me Trump. And we know what Trump thinks about climate change and all the other kinds of things we should be doing as far as conservation is concerned. Are you going to have a significant platform reply to the kind of positions that mini-me Trump is going to have?
So, you might actually think I wrote that question for myself. Because since being out of office, I actually started an organization called Forward Together Wisconsin. And that is an organization that was designed to be able to continue that work of the task force, while being out of office, bringing together a lot of the same stakeholders, but primarily engaged in implementation of the Inflation Reduction Act. Now, the Inflation Reduction Act was a fantastic piece of legislation we weren't even expecting to be as broad as it was, to help us reduce carbon emissions, to help us create good-paying jobs, and also promote sustainability. That said, if I were to ask around the room, a lot of people might be lost if I mentioned the IRA. And that's not a knock on you, it's not a dig on anybody in here. It's the fact that it was kind of convoluted. It was very dense. It was hard for even the experts to parse through. The guidance from the feds was very slow to come out. That being said, we needed a vehicle to help people understand it. And we provided technical assistance to some smaller units of government that didn't have that sort of support or staffing. We work with schools and we work with school districts to be able to tap into the tax credits from the IRA that are now repealed because of people like Tom Tiffany, Glenn Grothman, but also with direct pay. And direct pay allows nonprofit organizations, it allows even local government, schools, school districts to be able to finance their projects and almost immediately get about 30% back. Now, we work with schools like Forest Edge Elementary in Oregon, which was the state's first net zero school, and we were able to work with them as the example of what many more schools in in the state can look like. If we have one net zero school in the state, we should try to get net zero emission schools in every community. I mean, not only does this create a safer learning environment in terms of our students' health, it also creates a learning opportunity for them. And it also saves the second biggest cost that our schools are facing. First is staffing, the second cost is energy. Now, there was a year where Forest Edge Elementary paid a total of about $50 in energy costs. $50 for the whole year because they made that transition. So not only is it sustainable in terms of environmental stewardship, it's sustainable in terms of long-term financing for our schools, and we can take a whole lot of money and pump it back into education. As we know, it's a big issue with public education funding not being what it should be. And in addition to providing that technical assistance, we had a grassroots component to it where we knocked on doors just to educate people about how much money they could save. And I would read those Canvas reports. I remember, there's just one that sticks out because there was a woman that said that she didn't like Biden. She thought climate change was a hoax. And then when somebody told her, well, you can save this much money, she was bought in. So you can save this much money per year. And she was absolutely bought into the concept. And the third component was the direct support for income eligible households. We created a fund a fund that covered energy assessments, and then it covered weatherization work for homeowners. And we didn't get to as many, many multifamily units as we wanted to, because again, that guidance from the federal government was a little slow to come down, and by the time it happened, and the tax credits were effectively gone. But that was the work that I've been involved in, since being out of office, in addition to Power to the Polls. So the sustainability continues to be a focus of mine.
The surges have diminished some across the country, but we still have militarized federal officers by the thousands who are prepared to kidnap many of our neighbors. They're building large concentration camps to keep them and detain them and exile them. As governor, by the way, I love the word bold. You used it a couple of times. As governor, how bold are you willing to be to keep that from happening in our communities?
Yeah, I have never backed down from a fight. And some of those fights I didn't win. But the fact is, the people need to have confidence in their leaders and in leadership. And I think, you saw examples like even in Minnesota where Governor Walz could have compromised and he could have walked away, and he took some stances that, they weren't easy for him. But I do, and also Governor Pritzker in Illinois, and what it is going to take is a governor who is going to be bold to stand up to the administration when the federal government overreaches. If there are officers who are running afoul of the law or the Constitution, they should absolutely be prosecuted.
Question I like to ask every one of our governor candidates.
Oh, you took some personal privilege.
Oh,
Go ahead.
Oh, you can go first.
Go ahead first.
Okay, in a recent report, the Department of Administration projected that the state's population will decrease by nearly 200,000 residents over the next 25 years. This is due to an aging population and declining birth rates. This demographic decline will shrink the tax pool and may cause labor shortages. What are some, 3 key proposals you would make to reverse this trend?
Absolutely. So reversing the trend of population loss is the same as increasing the trend, or the trend, or promoting the trend of job creation. We have to invest in what matters. We have to make Wisconsin the best state to live, work, and raise a family. We have to make Wisconsin the most livable place, the best state in the entire country, and I do believe that we can do that. It doesn't just mean, putting up some banners and say, hey, come to Wisconsin. Look, people come here for travel, for recreation. It's one of the biggest pieces of our economy. However, people don't always choose Wisconsin as a place. And a couple of reasons are the ones that I mentioned. And one of those is higher education funding. Another is, again, K-12 funding. Another topic is the issue of childcare. When you talk about declining birth rates, people see bringing a child into this world, unfortunately, as a financial burden, because the cost of childcare is so expensive. And there are times when people might be able to afford a placement in childcare, but aren't able to get one because of the childcare worker shortage. And there are often times where people have an opening and aren't able to afford to place their child. We have to close that. And early in the campaign, I put out my plan for universal childcare. But again, investing in our schools, investing in higher education, investing in public transportation as well, so people can more easily get from point A to point B. And think about the things that bring people here for tourism. We have some of the greatest natural resources in the entire country. And not only do we have to protect them, we have to ensure that more people do have access and are able to enjoy everything we have. Like, some of the most beautiful parts of this state are the ones that are losing population the fastest. And another reason that is, you got healthcare shortages. You know, if you're in a very rural part of the state, you might have to travel upwards of an hour or more just to get to a doctor's appointment. And imagine trying to have a child. There's a maternal health crisis in many rural parts of the state as well. If you got to travel an hour to get to an appointment, you don't know when a baby's going to show up if you're pregnant. And people are making the decision, obviously, to not live in an area where they are so confined, where their options are so limited. And a piece of this too, what I do believe we may have to start exploring is, you know, how do we incentivize teachers or healthcare professionals moving into certain parts of the state that have seen population decline. I think that is probably one of the best options that we have in a crisis mode, like potentially losing 200,000 people over 20 years might be the best course of action for us.
Okay, I'll go. You talked earlier about ICE and overreach with ICE, but there's a lot more that's going on with federal overreach. You know, basically trying to get information, college enrollments into state universities, tax records, voter records. Do you see a way of being proactive and being able to effectively put a cap on that, put a handle on that to fight back and, you know, represent Wisconsin interests?
Absolutely. I'm glad you brought up the question because one other part of the equation that you brought up is comprehensive immigration reform at the federal level. And because there has been a lack of comprehensive immigration reform, we see Donald Trump inserting himself as the authority, and unfortunately so many people bought into it in 2016 and then again in 2024. But now, because of that overreach, he is losing favor, he is losing public support on immigration enforcement, but at the same time, nothing has really changed. And we have to have actual immigration reform that includes a just, humane policy for immigration enforcement, and we also need to completely reform the Department of Homeland Security as well to prevent these sorts of overreaches. And Kristi Nolan's bad. I have zero faith in Mark Wayne Mullen. And so the thing is, this administration, there's nothing to trust them about when it comes to immigration enforcement. They've shown their willingness to lie. They've shown their willingness to brutalize U.S. citizens and communities all across America. And to the other point about overreach, that's why the AG's race is so important as well, because that is our strongest line of defense. The Attorney General's office, the Department of Justice, that is empowered and also has the full support of the governor's office when it comes to filing lawsuits against the federal government.
How you doing, Mandela?
I'm great, man. Good to see you.
It's the third time I've seen Mandela. I seen him at the Forum down in Milwaukee last January and in West Bend about a month ago. Great candidate. All the candidates, in my opinion, are very good. There's not one I wouldn't mind being my governor. The big thing is who can beat Tiffany. Most of you all have a very similar platform. Do you agree?
You know.
Okay.
You think I'm about to give people credit up here. Everybody's platform is terrible. No,
Okay, my big thing is, I was backing a candidate for quite a while, and I'm not sure if she's can beat Tiffany right now. I'm kind of bewildered who I should be going for. I have two questions for you. Which two candidates have the best?
How can this get worse?
Which two candidates would have the best chance, in your opinion, of beating Tom Tiffany? And then what is it going to take to beat Tom?
So there's this guy whose first name is Mandela and another person whose last name is Barnes. But I'll just say, and I mentioned this a little bit in this I have been on both sides of elections, major elections with serious outcomes. Given that experience, there's not a single person running who has done either. And because of the race in 22, I had a chance to learn the lessons. I know exactly where we need to show up. I know where we need to show up and how we need to show up. And also, a lot of lessons were learned even just outside of myself. We were drastically outspent. I raised more money, but the super PACs, third party spending, they came in big, and there was not a lot to defend me. There was $50 million spent against me, about $11 million spent in my favor in third party money and resources. And I still came within 1 point. Again, it was the closest challenge to any incumbent in the entire country. Having gotten that far, I have a 1.3 million voter starting block. I know exactly what my floor is, which gives me a higher ceiling than anybody. And like I said, having run that race alongside Governor Evers in 2018, I absolutely think that is what makes me the most prepared to be in this race.
Now, I'm going to bring up the dirty word, racism. I still believe that Wisconsin has a problem with that. And it's not just racism with people of a different color, but because of a different sex, women. I think there's a large segment out there that will not vote for a woman, will not vote for a black person. How do you deal with that? How do you deal with that as you campaign?
Well, I will say Barack Obama had the widest margin in the state in a long time for any partisan office. So I do still believe, right, like we got very close. And nobody even thought, a lot of people, I'm not going to say nobody because folks in here knew we could do it, but a lot of folks outside of this room didn't think we would get that close. And so to that point, the best way to overcome it is to not settle for that. If this is what you believe to be true, I think that is something that's worth fighting for. I got this tattoo on my arm right here. It's Ezekiel Gillespie. Is the first black person to ever vote in the state of Wisconsin. And he was a person who purchased his own freedom. And in 1865, he went to attempt to go vote. And he was obviously told no, but he didn't take that no for an answer. He and a couple other folks got together and they took on the legal challenge. They went to court, and that case went all the way to the Wisconsin State Supreme Court, and he actually won. And by winning, he won the right to vote for just black men in the state of Wisconsin. And it's something that absolutely motivates me and gives me ultimate belief in what we can do as a state.
I just want to make another positive comment that I love this theme that I've seen in some of your media stuff. It says, let's bring back the Wisconsin way.
The Wisconsin way.
I think that's fantastic.
I appreciate it. We got to reject the Washington way because it hasn't done a thing for us.
That's right.
We got to embrace the Wisconsin way. As we said, we've done so many incredibly bold things before. Thank you.
Speaking of Wisconsin way, but incredibly bold things, as governor, what kind of bold actions would you look to take to set an example on the Great Lakes for data centers that are popping up all around these Great Lakes, given that it's going to be both eventually probably a state and a federal issue?
Yeah, and so we certainly need federal intervention, but we need a statewide set of standards. I have not been to a single room where people were in favor of data centers. And the reason why there's that lack of favorability is because we We've seen tech companies, we've seen social media companies come in throughout the last 15, 20 years and essentially do whatever they want to do. Zero accountability, zero consequences for their actions, their contributions to mental health crises amongst young people, for the acceleration of political polarization. And now the data center ultimately feels like a physical manifestation of it. And we've seen these non-disclosure agreements, these secrecy deals being signed. We see the potential impact on water quality, potential impact on air quality. Also studies that show wells have ended up running dry, and a 16-degree temperature differential, 16 degrees warmer in the vicinity of these data centers. All the reasons that we shouldn't like them. If a data center is going to come here, if we're going to have data centers, they should have to play by the rules. If they can't play by the rules, they can't be a good neighbor, they have no business in Wisconsin. And so what we need is a comprehensive comprehensive state set of standards that is determined. You need to bring in all partners, whether it's, I don't trust this EPA, but obviously EPA, Department of Natural Resources, and other stakeholders in any community where they are going to be present to determine what that impact will be. And in addition to the statewide set of standards, there has to be ongoing reporting. And that can't be self-reporting. This has to be like any other quality control monitor who comes in and ensures that they are doing the right thing, that there's no impact on our water quality, that there is no impact on our utility rates, and to also ensure that we are using renewable energy and creating Wisconsin jobs. If they aren't doing right by a community, and I have yet to see that example, then they don't belong in Wisconsin. And there's a bill too. Jody Patterson has a bill that pretty much outlines the same things that would create an actual governance structure. And I say it has to be statewide because we can't have them being denied in one community, and all of a sudden deciding that they are going to be able to go to some area that might be distressed and in deep need of some economic opportunity and see this as their way forward. I'm going to come down and go back. So I'll start back here. Right behind you. I'll start. Oh, I thought you had your hand up. Oh, sorry, I thought you had your hand up too. Sorry.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. No. We'll get it together.
I'm concerned, especially after, Tuesday was a real high, but I was also concerned about a number of referendums that lost for school districts. And I'm just wondering, with this unlimited private voucher school money that's about to take effect, how in the heck can we afford two public school systems?
The short answer, we can't
afford one.
We can't afford two systems.
No, and it's costing the taxpayers. I know some are putting it on a property tax bill, but I don't even know how many people read their property tax bill. I just think we've got to have a halt or something. What would you propose?
We absolutely have to cap that system because it has drained our traditional public schools. I am a proud public school graduate. One of the biggest public school proponents you'll ever run into. You saw the commercials, my mom saw public school. But I'll tell you that the quickest thing we can do to bring the system to a standstill is implement a form of accountability. My baseline is that public dollars belong in public schools. For any school, public or private, that receives public dollars, they should have to face the same set of public standards, accountability, governance, and even scrutiny. And I can tell you that if a number of these private schools would have to adhere to the same set of standards, private schools receiving public dollars, over half of them will fall out of the system overnight. And in addition to that, we have to close some of the loopholes, like the third Friday loophole. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the third Friday loophole, but on the third Friday is when schools count their number of students, their student population. And this is every semester. And what has happened before is that some of these private schools receiving public dollars have gotten their third Friday count, and after that third Friday is when they start to release some of the problem students. And, for anybody who's only listening, there are quotes around problem students. And those students, you know where they go back. But you know what does not come along with them. The students go back to the public schools and the money does not follow them, which is also creating a drain on the system. So we need more strict standards, and that will help us to be able to rein the system in and return public dollars back to public schools where it belongs.
Well, you also see the money, the public going for the building of auditoriums and gym complexes and things like that. I don't see it coming back to fund special ed programs or ADA specifications.
Well, that's the
for
other thing.
buildings.
We have to up our special education reimbursement rates.
Oh, yeah.
They're incredibly low in our public schools.
Well, and how come, the private vouchers can do 100% reimbursement and we get 33 if we're lucky,
Yeah.
So, thank you.
No, thank you.
Do you think Governor Evers will have a successful special session next Tuesday?
Hard to tell, I hope.
Not one of those where they call to order?
Where they gavel in and gavel out.
in and out?
At this point, I mean, I just don't know. I really don't know. It's what they do. They gavel in, they gavel out. No respect for the people, no respect for effectively the Constitution of the state, no respect for the way things should go and other norms of government. It's embarrassing and disrespectful to the people of Wisconsin, because every special session that he's called are things that the state is overwhelmingly in support of, but we've been consistently denied. But I can tell you though, the other part about that is there will be a new governor, a new speaker, and a new Senate Majority Leader. Everything will be different. The path to winning the governor's office effectively with this map that we're running under will have a majority in the state Senate. And if things continue to get worse, if they get any worse than they are now, there is a world where we can get a majority in the Assembly. We got to get 5 seats. It's not easy, but I'm telling you, in a good year with good organizing, we can absolutely make that happen.
Okay, going back to the AI thing. Because of some legislation down in Madison, a lot of the cities and municipalities are having to use these TID incentives and for these TIDs and TIFs in order to bring in larger companies to help them fulfill their tax base. And that is encouraging a lot of these municipalities to court larger corporations like Amazon, like Meta, like Vantage. What do you plan to do to try to reverse those still Walker era and the Republican legislator push to limit the ability of municipalities to form their own tax bases?
So one thing, that is tough in that conversation is local control, which I completely support. And I do not want to impede on local control because I always throw a fit when Republicans do it. And in keeping up and being very, keeping that same standard, I want to make sure that we are actually working with local government and also changing our statewide incentive structures for corporations and ensuring that we're doing more to help small businesses. And these companies are some of the most profitable in the world, and they are taking advantage of a bad situation. They don't need our money, but there are mom and pop shops, there are budding entrepreneurs all across Wisconsin, where if we were to spread those resources more evenly, we can make all of our communities thrive in Wisconsin. And a big piece of that is reforming the agricultural manufacturing tax credit. It has primarily benefited a lot of our corporate farming entities, our large factory farms, and large out-of-state corporations. And we need to ensure that we are being very diligent in providing relief to family farmers, putting more money and resources into farm-to-table programs, as an example, to connect family farmers with local grocers. There have been a number of grocery store closures on the north side of Milwaukee, and it's created brand new food deserts. And the idea of a food desert in a place that produces as much food as we do in Wisconsin is insane. And all we have to do is connect the dots. And that's how we provide better opportunities for people. So I want to see us do more to encourage small business growth, because that is the backbone of our economy. And so many of our small businesses have been left behind. They have been decimated by these tariffs. So many have been driven out of business. Many of them can no longer raise prices, because the more they raise prices, obviously the fewer people are going to come through their doors. And as long as that is the case, it doesn't matter what large corporation and warehouse you have in a community, there will be zero actual presence of people who are able to live there. And people who are able to not just earn a living, but to be able to enjoy themselves. So we just gotta switch our we got to switch gears on the incentive structures in this state.
How would you approach the issue of affordable housing?
Yep. So one of the biggest challenges we have with affordable housing is zoning in communities. Again, an issue where I don't want to impede on local control, but we do need to nudge some of these communities to build more multifamily units. And it's not just renting either. We need to create a path to home ownership as well, to make it easier for folks to be able to lay down roots to stay in the community and to be able to pass down those homes to the next generation to create wealth, particularly with communities that have not been able to do so historically. But in addition to that, we have to ban private equity from being able to come in and buy up properties en masse, because we're talking about cash buyers who make it impossible for people to be able to buy their starter homes. There's almost no such thing as a starter home anymore, because private equity is coming and gobbling it all up, and they aren't being attentive to these properties either, and they are leading to more community decay because these homes aren't kept up the way they should be, and also it's pricing people out. And I want to be a little bit more deliberate than a 1-minute answer on this, because there's a world where we're able, to work with developers more closely for affordable housing. But we know that the current affordable housing, when it comes to apartments, that dynamic has not worked long term. And we have to make sure that we aren't just primarily benefiting developers, right? We need a structure that actually works for communities, because once that obligation is done to provide, affordable housing units in a development, and they just go back to the charge of market rate, and then we're stuck in the same old problem we've been in.
How do you balance the needs of large metropolitan areas like Milwaukee with the large rural areas up in the northern part of the state, getting resources to both of them that are equitable?
Yep. And so the thing about that is we're all dealing with the same exact stuff. People want a good school to send their children to. People want a good job, one good job that puts food on the table. People want to be able to go to a doctor without a surprise bill. And if you're in a rural community or if you're in Milwaukee, chances are you have, by and large, you've been denied those three things. And it's not as if we have to provide for one and forsake the other. We have to come up with a fix for everybody. And whether it's affordable housing, whether it's the issue of healthcare, whether it's the issue of public transportation, the pot has been shrunk, downsized so much that nobody's getting anything. And that's why I talk often about the fact that, when I travel the state, when I have conversations with people, they aren't left and right conversations, they're top and bottom. And all of our communities have continued to be left behind because there are folks who are making out like bandits, and if the wealthy are not paying their fair share, if these large corporations that are coming into our state are not paying their fair share, there are fewer resources for our schools, and that's why some of these school districts are going to referendum as well. There are fewer resources for us to be able to provide essential services, and I just wish they realized too that the more we invest in public transportation, the more we do to increase job growth, the more we do to increase a person's ability to be able to, to get to and from work. If they want to talk about a worker shortage, well, some people have issues with transportation. If we have more public transportation options, we help close that gap and create new opportunities for families. And when these folks are receiving a paycheck, we increase our tax base across all of Wisconsin. So I totally get you right there, but it's so often we find ourselves in this conversation about an urban-rural divide, and I try to dispel that anytime the conversation comes up, because all of us have been going without for far too long. All of us have been denied the quality of life that we should come to expect in the most wealthy nation on the entire planet.
What are some thoughts?
Well, this has been really great. I can't wait to drink some water. This has truly been fantastic. I truly appreciate the invitation. You got a sign-up sheet back there. Hope to see you all along the way on the campaign trail. I seriously can't thank you all enough for everything that y'all are doing to get amazing people elected up and down the ballot. This campaign, this election cycle could not come at a more critical time. This is for the future of Wisconsin. And as I said before, so many of us have been around for the ups and the downs. Let's make sure that we do everything we possibly can to make Wisconsin that bright shining star in the Midwest. I'm tired of looking to our neighbors in Minnesota and Michigan and saying, oh man, I wish we had their minimum wage. Oh, I wish we had their legalized marijuana. I wish we had, whatever issue. I wish we had expanded Badger Care or expanded Medicaid like they've done. I'm tired of looking into these school lunch. I'm tired of looking at these other places with envy. It's time for us to be in the driver's seat. It's time for us to be the envy of our Midwest neighbors, and also again to once again be that example for the entire country. So really, truly appreciate you all. Thank you so much for having me.
All right, let's give one more round of applause for our candidates. And just to let you guys know what's going on in the next week, this coming Saturday, we'll be having a nomination signature drive. So like Amanda mentioned in her closing statements, we're going to have congressional signature forms as well as governor signature forms, and possibly assembly district and maybe state senator. We'll see. So feel free to come to our office from 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. to sign signatures. And yeah, if you want to get involved, feel free to contact the county party, and we'll definitely accept any help that we can get. Thank you guys so much for coming.